So welcome to this town hall. It is town hall number 80, which is weird to think about that it's already been 2 years, but hey, going well. So we'll keep going. Next slide. So I am one of your hosts. I'm John Best, Best Innovation Group. And the more important person is, as Ron pointed out, the actual celebrity amongst us is Mike Lawson. He is the host of CU Broadcast.
I just delivered the messages. That's all.
Yeah, that's what you say. Let's move on to the next one. So it wouldn't be a show without our sponsors. We're so thankful for them. CUNA Councils. Councils are getting rolling. I just actually did confirm I am speaking, I think, at one or two of them. I got to remember which ones. One of them, I think, is the
one,
HR
right?
conference. Yeah, the HR one. I don't think they knew what they were getting when they asked that. So
what are we thinking?
I'm the last guy you want to come to an HR conference, but hey, if that's what you want. So go to CUNA.org, check it out. And you'll also find that information on Big's website as I roll out the different places that looks like I'll be speaking in person at. Oh, and I'll be speaking at NVIDIA's virtual event for GPU next week. So that'll be exciting, talking about semantic data and synthetic data processing as it relates to AI. So I'm very excited about that. All right. You want to take the next one?
Sure, I'll take Correlation. Correlation, one of the best credit union core processors in the industry. Obviously, their open architecture really kind of frees up credit unions kind of do what they want to do with third-party vendors, allowing them to kind of almost kind of plug and play third-party vendors. So again, it allows the credit unions the freedom to really go where their members want them to go, and in a financial services technology sense. So yeah, good stuff. Good folks at Correlation. They are a success for good reason. Go check them out at correlationinc.com.
Yeah. Our other sponsor is Member Pass, powered by Bonify, the former CU Ledger. And Ron, you'll like this. I think you'll be at JAC. I read your recent Forbes article regarding the metaverse. And we're going to be exploring XR, which is not quite the metaverse, but has some place in there. And not today, but I'd love to have you back on to debate that topic. I like what you wrote. I think there was a lot of good things, but I also take some issue here and there that I'd love to chat about at some point. But not today. Today is all about Google. So, but Member Pass will be at the JAC. It's really the quickest way to get rid of your passwords, and it just makes logical sense that in a meta environment that you're going to need a way to understand who you're really dealing with if you are going in that. Oh, and Ron, did you see the announcement from, was it JP Morgan? Who was it today?
Yes, JP Morgan in the metaverse.
But they've got money to just throw away.
I thought that was the article I actually published just a couple hours ago on that as well. So
I was talking about the previous one. I thought that was great.
Yeah.
So but that's we'll get into it a little bit today if there's time, but we're here to discuss. Glenn's got a very specific agenda, and you cannot deviate from his agenda. If CU Broadcast, and for those of you that don't know, that's Mike's Mike's area. He is basically it if you want to know what's going on, and there just literally couldn't be a nicer person in the industry.
Well, thank you. We just actually had Ron on last week, so thank you for taking time, Ron. That was fun.
Yeah, this is getting a little too cozy, isn't it? It's like
yeah, it's getting a little, well, he's in his garage, so it's not that cozy, but
okay.
I like my garage.
And then there's us, Best Innovation Group. Lately we've been helping a lot of people do a lot of work on SDKs. So if you've got a home banking platform and you want to start building on top of it, but maybe you don't have the right people, and you want to start accessorizing it, creating a more something that's more along the lines of your brand as opposed to sort of what you get there. We've worked with all the big ones, Alchemy, Q2, Connect. We've done a lot of work in implementing that. So if you're interested and you have some projects that you're looking at adding to your home banking, that's what we do these days anyways. So let's get on with it to our special guest, the man, the legend, Ron Shevlin, Chief Research Officer at Cornerstone. I'm impressed that you've been able to work with Steve that long. A lot of people, by Steve, I mean Steve Williams. And I still kind of hold a grudge against him because he out Van Halen'd me one night at a bar, and I'm still pretty ticked about that. So I pretty much was sure I knew the most minutia about Van Halen, but it turns out that Steve Williams was able to.
He's a Southern Cal guy, so you're not going to beat him on that.
Yeah, but see, he's older. I just thought he would have been a Beach Boys guy. But what are you gonna do?
Yeah, he's not that old. Come on.
Well,
that's going way back.
That's what I like to tell him.
That's for me,
senior,
John.
you were the Beach Boys guy.
For me.
Yeah, you were the Beach Boys. You were at the Beach Boys parties. You told me that. Senior contributor at Forbes, and his Forbes articles are fantastic. I regularly read them. Author of Smarter Bank, writer of FinTech, Snark Tank, for Forbes, and he's going to discuss dissection of Google Pay, which I thought was extremely interesting, and I'm really excited to get into this. So, without further ado, and Madison's posting some of those articles into our chat for you guys if you want to go and read them. Before we go on, though, hey, we got something for you here. We are just trying to get some information. If you're a credit union, please go to cucrypto.report. It's completely free. All we want is, and we don't want any member information. We have what you need to pull information about your members investing in crypto. We're finding that it's an interesting trend. We have about what, Elliot, about 20 credit unions, Innovation Club plus another 6 or so.
Yeah.
That have already done it. And when we're done, if you'll give us this data, we'll give you a copy of the report, the free report and the findings, which, folks like Glenn are going to help us parse that data. We've got some other folks, but we're comparing it to, what's going on in the crypto market. Do members buy low and do they bring money back in? So, once they take it out and they make money and they take their dividends, do they bring it back to the credit union? Wouldn't you like to know? And is it a rising trend? So please go to, it's free. I can't emphasize that enough. It's free. www.cucrypto.report. All right, now let's get going. So Glenn, you are, you said to me, look, I'm willing to talk to Ron Shevlin about this. And I said,
very few people are. So that
very few people are willing to go that far. So I'm going to hand this over to you to start the discussion because my head's still wrapped around his metaverse stuff. So I'm going to let you jump in.
Well, we'll definitely leave some room for that one too. But Ron, I also noticed, I believe you're in the process at Cornerstone of celebrating your 20th anniversary too, correct?
Yeah, February 1st was the Cornerstone's 20th anniversary. I haven't been there that long, but they promise it's going to be a year-long celebration. So get ready for that. That's going to be really annoying.
Congratulations. You've been there. I mean, you're there longer than I realized too. I think you're up to what, 6-7 years?
I'm coming up on 7 years, which is, let's get that 7 year. It just be time to, no, I'm not going anywhere.
One of those
somewhere
like
Steve Williams just fainted. That's what just happened.
Well, anyway, I mean, as John said, I love your stuff on Forbes. I always find it fascinating, but the Google Pay one really, and it's probably in part because I'm so fascinated by the Googleplex checking account, the fact that it never launched, they pulled back, but you really did a really, I thought, thorough deep dive that felt almost like an industry, equity analyst report in terms of really looking at how the whole thing came together. So I'd love to just make sure that everybody, shine a bit more light on it and maybe ask a few more questions too.
Yeah, sure.
Let me start with, I think, at the very beginning of the article, you mentioned that Google Pay's two main challenges are, one, no strategy, and two, no organizational alignment. Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play?
Right.
You want to elaborate on that? Does it kind of all, at the end of the day, is that what it boils down to?
Well, I think those are the major things. And I point those out to sort of contrast it against, I don't think Google has a technology problem. I don't think their problem is the lack of quality of what they're turning out. There may be people who argue that, but I don't think that's what's kind of holding them back. And I think what kind of spurred that article too was they had just announced a new head of their Google Pay group division, whatever they call it there, a former PayPal executive. And I don't know this PayPal executive. I'm sure he's very good at what he does and may turn out to be the absolute greatest thing that Google needs. But my first take was just sort of theoretically, conceptually, if I thought who needs to come, what do they need from an organizational perspective to make this group work? Is not somebody who knows payments. It's somebody who knows the organization and can make it work. I think when you look at what's kind of happened with Google Pay over the past few years, they've gone through a number of different leaders of the organization who've all been very smart people really good technologists, super sharp in terms of understanding the industry and payments, but just sort of not made it work. And why is that? And I think it comes down to sort of not knowing what they want to be when they grow up. And part of that being because the rest of the organization, the culture drives what the organization does. And you all know that working in the organizations that you do. And I think the reality with Google is that an overwhelming percentage of their revenue comes from advertising. And so therefore that drives a lot of investment and a lot of decision and a lot of culture. You know, in an organization like Apple, it's not, there's a different source of revenue, but you know, they're very hardware driven and device driven. And what they do with a lot of their ancillary products and services is make investments in things that will drive further use of Apple products. Now, in the world of financial services and payments, setting everything up to drive more advertising can be a bit problematic, especially when you're working with partners like financial institutions, and partly when you're working with consumers with their payments and financial information who don't want their data shared from this privacy issues, and not to mention that they don't want advertising disrupting their financial transactions for fear of security problems, not going through whatever millions of things. So when I kind of try to assess, you know, what should this new leader of Google Pay really be focusing on? It's not product development and product design, and it isn't payments. It's figuring out what's the business model for Google Pay. Is it going to be advertising or not? And if it's not going to be advertising, how is that going to square with the rest of the organization, who's very driven from a cultural perspective around driving advertising revenue? So I'll stop. Let you guys comment on that if you want, or tell me I'm wrong. That's fine. But that was kind of my take and assessment of it.
I think when you look at it from sort of a macro level, I can see what you're talking about. But I think the primary purpose of it, Ron, is it's a Me Too for Apple Pay. Let me ask you a question. Do you use an Android device?
I don't know.
Okay, so I do every day. I have a Samsung and I have the other thing, which is also brings another interesting play into this, which is Samsung Pay. So if you use an Apple device, which I also use as well, I have one, then Apple Pay is really well integrated, right? It's so integrated that now it's, you go to a website and it will say, hey, I can pay with Apple Pay because of the new technology, the ability, sort of the Web3 stuff that allows you to just jump over into those apps. Where I think Google is trying to compete is in that utility. But you're right. I don't think that they have another strategy around that. The only strategy I've seen is, hey, we got to allow people to pay with their phone. We got to allow people to pay because that's what Apple does. And we got to allow them to pay in the store. But I don't see them on the major sites. And in fact, I'm usually surprised. And I've been doing some just quick research on this as I poke around the web at which sites will accept Apple Pay as a hybrid and which ones will accept Google Pay if you go between them. So I do think that while I don't believe there's a bigger sort of financial strategy, I do think there is some strategy in they couldn't sell those devices without Google Pay working on the Pixel or working on the Android operating system.
So let me push back on the Me Too comment, because I do think Google did announce a number of interesting features over the past couple of years. Whether or not it was really Google Pay or Googleplex is actually kind of hard for me to distinguish. But I was kind of a big fan of the Googleplex checking account that they were coming out. I thought there was a lot of unique features, things, like paying remotely for gas or for restaurants, and you can find it using the find the local gas station and then just pay for it directly through your, Google Pay app or Googleplex app, whatever it might have been, whichever one it was. I always I actually get calls with Google too, and they always kept trying to correct my use of Googleplex versus Google Pay. So I may not be the only one confused about that, but I thought there were some interesting features in the Googleplex product. But here, after stringing a bunch of banks and a number of credit unions along for close to 2 years, they kind of unceremoniously just killed the product and left everybody hanging, even though there were some interesting features. So I get your point about the integration with the Apple, but that kind of helps me. I think it kind of helps make my point that, Apple's got the more integrated, aligned strategy where Google just not quite sure what it wants to be when it grows up on the payment side.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I agree with you that there's not a strategy there. I'm not seeing that. I'm just saying that from my perspective, I feel like, and we've done some dealing with Google. Our organization does Google Home, and we also do Alexa for credit unions. And I've also been working with Ray Kurzweil, who is amazing, Singularity guy, and then all of that. And what I've learned from dealing with Google directly is that they are very much remind me of Microsoft of the old days, where there are a lot of divisions, and I don't know that the other divisions know. And someone like Plex could probably rise up and start something with blessing from whatever feudal system they have to control all that, and begin to make these promises only to be squashed by someone else. But I don't disagree from a strategic plan. I think it does make your point. But what I do know is that, for what I've seen on the app itself from using it so frequently, is one, it hasn't evolved at all. So I think you're right about that. But it does work. It does work well. Google Pay will pay just like Apple Pay at pretty much any NFT or and did I say NFT? Any platform that will accept the mobile payments. So
I see a couple of interesting comments in the chat. If you're not following along, David Rubino. David, you said something that I was thinking. I'm glad you confirmed it. That in terms of me too, I think Google actually got there first. It's just that Apple got the traction first, so therefore they're kind of perceived as being the leader in that space as well. John, the thing that you just said about the fact that I think it's clearly Google's probably a pretty complex organization and probably a pretty challenging place to work. Ron, when you were making your comments, it sounded to me like your take would be that a wiser choice to lead Google Pay wouldn't be a payments expert from outside of Google, but somebody who knew how to navigate that organization.
Yes, I think that's spot on, Glenn. Or an alternative to that is, look, I'll said it before. I was a big fan of the Googleplex. I thought at first I was really skeptical, but over time I thought it was a great move, and I really liked the idea of Google partnering with, and that's probably too ambitious a word. They were selling to banks and credit unions. It was helping them. They were becoming a vendor. Now they already are a vendor on the Google Cloud side. And there are folks in the Google Cloud division who come out of the banking world. I mean, Yolanda Piazza runs that organization from a financial services perspective. She came out of Citi. They've got a ton of talent on the banking side in Google Cloud, but yet it seemed like there was no, well, I know for a fact Googleplex was in the Google Pay group, not the Google Cloud. And so I think they were left with folks who really didn't understand the banking industry, both from a bank and credit union perspective, and the folks who do understand it are over in the cloud side. So that's why I say that, from a strategy perspective, they got to figure out, where does this thing belong? Where are they really trying to sell? I mean, I think it's the cloud group too that also has AI-based tools to help from a lending perspective. So they already have a distribution channel for financial institutions on the Google Cloud side, and I don't see that on the Google Pay side. And I think that's been part of their challenge is as strictly a consumer product, they don't have that angle to drive a lot of distribution and adoption.
Ron, I have a quick question. I may have missed it. You know how sometimes you say no to something and you never see it again. Does Google Pay have a equivalent to the Apple Card?
That's a good question. I think they did, but I have not seen that in a while. So that may have been another one of those products that got discontinued. But I do remember seeing something a couple of years ago. I think David just shook his head. And if there's ever anything I don't know, then ask David Rubino, because he usually does. Because he's especially on the Google side, I think he's an Android user there too. So, but there you go. seen.
How do you feel about that as Apple's strategy? Because they've really, and just to give you an example, I recently bought a brand new Mac and I used the Apple Store, and they said, "Hey, you want to use Apple credit card?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, why not? Let's see what that looks like." And I went through the whole process on the mobile phone, and it was slick. Who's behind that? Goldman Sachs, I believe, is the group behind that. Is that something that it seems like that would be a better strategy for Google Pay than anything else, given the fact that the advertising just doesn't fit into the pay for play kind of plan as anything
John,
else?
I'll argue this vehemently. I think the answer to that is it depends. It depends on the strategy and who they're selling to. Apple did what they did because they basically have given the middle finger to banks and credit unions and said, look, we don't really care about you. We are going to compete with you and do what we want. And you can live with it or not. And so they went and partnered with Goldman Sachs to be the bank behind the credit card. And Google, I think, is taking a different approach, or seems to have been taking a different approach. With the Plex, it looked like it wanted to be more of a partner and provider to the financial institution space. And clearly with the cloud division, it tends to be larger institutions who are the clients there. But maybe there's a path and a game plan on that side of it to go more downstream to the mid-sized financial institutions. So, but Google has to decide, are banks and credit unions going to be competition a la Apple, or are they going to be customers and partners, which seemed to be the path they were going down with Plex and cloud, or not? And so if they're going to go down the credit card path, then clearly they have to partner with a financial institution from a regulatory perspective to do it. But the question then becomes, who would that be? What's the best way to do that? And is there a way to get more financial institutions involved if the idea is to, well, let's sell more products and services like cloud and other AI-based technologies where, you don't want to, unlike Apple, who's, basically telling the rest of the financial institution space, screw you, we're going to partner with Goldman Sachs and the hell with the rest of you. Google's got to make this decision about where it's not just their payment strategy, but where do they want to play in the financial institution world. Now, Bill Reddy came out, who runs the e-commerce group there, came from PayPal, and I'm blanking out the Braintree payments from before that. And he reiterated that Google does not want to become a bank or a credit union, and I think that's been pretty obvious. But okay, you don't want to be that, then fine. Are banks and credit unions going to be your competition, or are they going to be your customers?
Well, I always thought that the Plex play was to get more data, right? So you mentioned that Google's, primary source of income is advertising. The way that advertising is put together is through their search engine dynamics, analytics, and the information they put together. What their dream is to know what Ron Shevlin actually buys beyond, so that then they can advertise that much more effectively. They can sell that data. And so the idea of sticking a shim into the card where they have some idea of what's going through, because they can do geographic looking, those sorts of things, it seemed like a tremendous opportunity. So that's what I was a little hesitant about. I think, Glenn, you and I had long discussions about that on the podcast, that, hey, beware of a Trojan horse that's really just there to sort of siphon your data. But that was always what I thought their play was going to be. So, and I think Apple is, they're two sort of opposing views. Apple obviously has decided that privacy is going to be what they sell, and they're going to try to stick to that. And then Google, they don't want to talk about it because they know they want to use your data.
You get back into that argument, if you don't pay for the product, you are the product.
Right.
And I heard it said that, I think Google at one point made the statement, we're not going to sell this data. My thought is they don't have to sell the data. If they can use the data to help run their own engine, they're going to make the money internal.
I think that was good posturing on the part of Apple. I'll make this comment and see how you guys react to it. I think Apple says that it's pushing for privacy because they don't have the data analytic capabilities to actually do what Google does with its data analytic capabilities. So I think that's why Apple takes that tact. But I don't think that Google, I wouldn't have used the word siphon the data. What Google wants to do with that data is close the loop of advertising and be able to go back to advertisers and say, we can now prove that your advertising on Google resulted in purchases, because now we can actually see and connect to the accounts. I think at some point, the folks at Google looked at this and said, at the rate we're going, one financial institution at a time signing on to Googleplex, we're never going to get there, not with a bunch of mid-sized financial institutions. I mean, they had Citibank, which is a super large institution, but a relatively small retail footprint from a checking account perspective, not, maybe more so on the credit cards, they're much bigger. But I think someone looked at that and said, we're just not going to get the scope and scale we need to close that data loop with this. And so therefore, well, let's just shoot this thing down and kill it now.
When they closed it down, and it's kind of to your point, are we going to be competitors or are we going to be, vendors and, providers, suppliers to banks? They seem to, some of the wording I saw was they're going with the latter. They plan, they say they're going to be, partners and suppliers, vendors to banks. And there seemed to be some concern that their actions were being misconstrued. So if that's the case, or whether that's just kind of the justification for getting out, I don't know exactly how you get back in, but I have to assume they're going to do something different in this space. Well, they just hired another head, so something's down the road. How many more shots at this do you think they have now that they've kind of had, I don't know how many different false starts?
I think they've got as many shots as they want to take, because they're Google and they got a lot of money to put towards this. And I think they've got a culture that says, hey, we put our money into a lot of things, they don't all pay out, and we kill it when it's time to kill it. Unlike a lot of banks and credit unions, where you guys know your own organizations, how many projects you got still going on 5-6 years down into it, they're still kind of hanging on. I bet some of you got some of those projects sitting around.
Those are the ones where you show up and like people have retired, but they're still coming because they like the company.
There you go.
There's always
what
one
was
guy
the name of that guy from Office Space, down in the basement?
Yeah, that was in the basement. Yeah, that he had his stapler.
The one thing in your article, Ron, that stood out, mainly because it's the only thing that I kind of clearly disagreed with, I wanted to just kind of test with you, is you made the comment about Googleplex and why the banks got on board, is you said they wanted a better checking product. And my question was, I didn't get the impression, unless Google was sharing a lot more along with them, that was there really enough clarity on what that product was for them to know if they were signing on? And to me, it was more a matter of keep your enemies closer. And if this is going to be going forward, I'd rather be part of it and understand what it is they're doing.
So yeah, good points, Glenn, but I'll back up my statement. And by the way, I will tell you, and I say this often, if you disagree with something I write, join the club, because even I disagree with things I write. I need to just kind of put it out there and see if I can create an argument around it and see if it holds or not. So I don't even agree with everything I write. I just kind of put it out there. But this one I do agree with. And listen, when they first announced the second wave of partnerships, let's see, the first one was in November 2019, and they announced Citi and Stanford Federal Credit Union. And then about 7-8 months later, mid 2020, I guess it would be, they announced another round of like 9 different financial institutions. And I reached out to almost every one of those financial institutions, and some were fintechs out, actually, Bank Mobile, I guess, which I guess it's always been an FI because they've had customers banking behind that. I reached out to practically all of them to ask, what are your expectations with Googleplex? Why are you doing this? And what have you seen? And they must have all signed NDAs because nobody would share anything with me. Although I really got the sense that they weren't sharing anything with me because they really didn't know. And I think at that point, they really didn't know. But at some point later on, I can't remember if it was in 2020 or in 2021, Google did announce a bunch of features. It must have been 2020 because I published a report called How to Compete with Googleplex, which is another reason why I'm really ticked off at Google for having killed this product. I wrote a whole report telling banks and credit unions how to compete with it, and then they go and kill the damn product. But they had announced those features like the gas payments and the restaurant payments and some really cool PFM type features. So at some point, Glenn, they did, release what some of those features were, and they were pretty cool, and it was pretty slick. And I also thought, and although they never really talked much about this, it seemed to me like the potential was always Google could really integrate this in to the browser itself. That would, really bring new capabilities of, tying in the financial institutions, checking account or product into the browsing experience. So I thought that was, some of the stuff that was getting a bunch of financial institutions to sign on. But I remember my first round of interviews and conversations with the folks who had signed on, and a lot of their, rationale was, I think they just wanted to, get the whiff of innovation by, tagging along with Google.
I'll add into that. When I first heard it, I think I said this on the podcast too. I thought it would have super value. If you remember, around the same time they talked about Google Duplex, and they did that incredible demo where the Google Assistant called a hair salon and sort of acted like an assistant for somebody to schedule a salon appointment, which to me was pretty incredible from a sort of a personal API sort of point that I see coming at some point. And I thought, wow, the next thing it needs to do is close that loop, like you were saying earlier, by paying for it. So I really thought they were going to integrate like Google Home, Google, at the time, I think it was Google Assistant, into that as well. So yeah, I saw some of the same things. There was a lot to the ecosystem.
If anybody else wants to throw in a question, I got one more for you, Ron, that kind of comes out, kind of maybe to help wrap up this topic. Yeah, I think you kind of alluded to this in the article too. Is there a path by which you could picture Google spinning off this business? I mean, or does it just make too much sense for it to somehow have a tie into the mothership?
I'm not sure who would be the good candidates to sell that to. It would seem to me to have to be somebody who's very focused in the Android world to begin with, because that seems to be where the tie-in is. So, it doesn't seem to me to be the kind of product that somebody would want to buy unless they were already developing for the Android environment.
It's kind of odd when we think about it in, kind of as a parallel to Samsung play too, because Apple's got that dual role. It's providing the hardware and it's also running the operating system. So, in theory, you could think of this as Android Pay and just run it across everything on that platform.
Didn't they call it that? Gerbino will know this, right? David, didn't they once call this Android Pay?
Yes, they did.
I wonder why.
And then it was Google Wallet, and then it was Google Pay.
Yeah.
It had several migrations, and that was during the hybrid NFC moment that happened where, Apple had a walled garden for their Apple Pay, and how they did it is a little technical. Hey, I have a question for you, Ron. So rank them in order. Give it to me. So Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, Google Pay, Amazon Pay. Give me, maybe the top 5 in order of what you think are the most, the most prolific for users.
Are you in actual adoption utilization?
No, in your mind of, like I was sitting here trying to think, does Samsung Pay beat Google Pay? And I don't know how many of you've used. I've used almost all of them. So I just was wondering what you thought.
I'll look at this sort of from where's the disruption potential.
Mm-hmm.
Not UI, UX kind of stuff,
okay.
But
or utility.
This disruption potential. Apple Pay, number one, I think, just in terms of how it could potentially fit into like their overall strategy, and especially now with their payment acceptance. Was it the MobiWave acquisition? Now they've announced, that the iPhones. I just think their payment strategy and financial services strategies really kind of coming together now that they can address the merchant side more deeply. Number 2 would be Amazon, because I think that they've got that as well. You've also kind of begs the question, John, where do you put like a Square Cash App into this. And
I think that's a good point.
I think what they've done in building out both the Square Cash App user base and what they've got on the merchant side is just huge potential from a disruption perspective. I'm always amazed that Amazon has not done more in this space. Maybe they don't have to, I don't know, but I kind of look at the Google and Samsung as kind of being much lower on that list. And I think Apple and Square are the ones that towards the top of that disruptive list.
Yeah, I think if you're looking for a transformational technology, it's something that's going to have more of that disruption, I would actually put Amazon up higher. But I will say this, and this is a good segue into our next discussion, which is, I believe you're right. There is always a strategy behind what Apple does. And Apple has watched Microsoft develop the HoloLens. It's watched Facebook make a lot of progress with Oculus and change their name to Meta and all the other things that go with it. But there is something to be said for XR. And let me explain those three concepts for everyone, because I'm not sure everyone understands that. So there's virtual reality, and that's putting on, let me see if I have it. This will make Ron happy. That's putting on, one of these. That's putting on one of these, and you can see I can't see through it. It has cameras on the outside, but I can't see through it. This is if I put it on, this is my world. I don't see through this. So that's VR. Then there's what's called augmented reality. That's what a HoloLens is. So I can still see through it. And Mike and I did 3 years, maybe 4 years ago, an incredible, you should repost that one in honor of the metaverse. But I actually took the HoloLens and I gave him a view of what I was seeing and how it could, do what's called AR. So AR could make it look like there's a real hand truck over here or a real table that literally looks like it's really there, even though it's not. It just would augment your current reality. That's why it's called augmented reality. What XR is doing is it's marrying those two technologies to create one hybrid sort of solution. It's kind of like there used to be mobile sites and there used to be websites, and now they're all kind of one thing. What XR is doing is taking those two things together and saying, yeah, let's make virtual reality one thing. Let's try to get VR and AR kind of together so they have some synergy, and you don't have to redevelop everything between them. So I think that, and I'll just give you my ultimate dream shopping experience, Ron. So I put on my Google glasses. I don't want to bring a phone anywhere. I'm sick of my phone. I'm okay with the watch or whatever it is you want to wear. I head in and I start looking at things and it's telling me, hey, it's giving me cyborg-like Terminator details in a way that's probably Apple-ish and, works for me in their methodology of UI. And then I throw it all in the cart, which Walmart's doing this now. It's akin to stealing, which I sort of enjoy. I tried it. You start throwing things in the cart, they're getting scanned, and then you leave. Right. Next step is just to put, how they have that little baggage carousel at the end that the people throw stuff in. They just need to put little bags on the side of the cart so you can bag as you go. And they won't have checkout counters anymore. So, but being able to pay on the way out and incorporating that into the glasses, and also sort of giving you a choosing way. So one of the things that I've been looking at is what they call eye tracking, which is allowing you to use the menu by moving your eyes around. Oh yeah, there's the original. There's a picture of it. So, that I think could be sort of that strategy. But I've noticed that you seem to be sort of down on these sorts of things, Mr. Shevlin. I'm worried that you don't have your goggles on, and I wanted to discuss a little of that because I'm fascinated by the metaverse and what it looks like and how it's going to come together. But I'm also fascinated by, and I'll give you the one point of your thing that I took issue with, the one point of your previous article, which, by the way, I want to hear about this article as well. I want to hear, because the title of this is JP Morgan's opening a branch in the metaverse, but it's not what you think it is, which I think is probably a really good point for everyone. But, the one thing you said was, I already have this. It's home banking, it's mobile banking. And that's where I disagree with you. I don't think you've truly experienced what VR can be or what AR can be, if you would say that, because they are way two different experiences in terms of how the customer service and how an embodied sort of approach could change things. But I'm curious to hear more about that.
Okay, so you're much more ensconced in the whole virtual shopping experience than I am. I already have my dream shopping experience, which is I stay at home and work, and my wife goes to the mall, comes back and says, "Hey, I bought you a shirt." Because God knows if I did it myself, it would not be a pretty sight. When
I will give you that. That is
when I
my
got
dream
home.
shopping experience, but I don't have that luxury. So.
And then I also have the benefit of having, I have three daughters, two of whom one works at Nike and the other at Vineyard Vines. You can see that. So,
oh yeah, I noticed that.
And I got my Nike, my Nike running pants on too. So yeah, I've got it really, really good in that, I've got personal shoppers for me who make sure that I look good at all times. So I already have my dream shopping experience. But my point about the mobile banking was in very specific, John, to a reference not to virtual shopping and virtual reality, but to a research firm that was advocating that banks should build virtual branches in the metaverse to somehow provide personalized, banking experiences. And that was what I was kind of taking exception to. Not so much the shopping retail experience, because yes, the mobile banking apps don't do anywhere near the kind of support for a retail shopping experience. But the idea that, you'd have more personalized customer support in the metaverse in some branch, I was just kind of just laughing that one off. I just didn't see that being the real take. But what my argument in both yesterday's article or last week's, I've actually written 3 now about the metaverse. I really need to branch out a little bit here and start going back to some other categories and topics.
Am I allowed to write rebuttals on Forbes if I call them or something?
You can't, but if you let me know, I'll the next time I write about it, I'm more than happy to quote you on that. So
okay, good.
First my argument was, that we're going to see this explosion in virtual real estate investing. As
well, I think you made a great point on that. Go ahead. I love this point.
And I think it's not all speculation. It's new business. And this was the topic of the article I published on Monday. Is I think this is just an absolutely huge lending opportunity. It's virtual real estate. It's not mortgages. It's more like small business lending.
Yes, that was the best line.
Because what these people are doing, yes, I'm sure there's some speculation that the basic price of the virtual land will increase, even if they do nothing on it. But what a lot of folks are trying to do is build revenue generating businesses or games, whatever it might be, enterprises on this virtual space. And as a bank or credit union, it's just like small business lending. You've got to evaluate not just the person, but the business idea and the business opportunity. And I think this is going to be a absolutely huge opportunity for financial institutions. Now, today's article, man, if I tell you, if Chase had only made their announcement 24 hours earlier, I would have only had to write one article instead of 2, but I had to jump on the bandwagon here. I think people will look at, and without reading about anything, they'll say, "Oh, Chase built a bank branch in the metaverse." They're not even calling it a bank branch; they're calling it a lounge, and it really is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. I went into it. Basically you walk in and the first thing you see is a picture of Jamie Dimon, which I'm sure they did that
like a virtual one, as
yes.
Like him in a smoking jacket with a pipe and that kind of thing.
It should be that, but it's like a picture on the wall, a NFT like picture of Jamie Dimon, and it morphs into the picture of the woman who runs Onyx. I believe that's who it was, which is their blockchain group. So you don't even see the picture of Jamie Dimon, but I'm sure they did that just to boost his ego and go, "Oh, this will be great."
And the Onyx folks are who developed Quorum, which has been fairly successful.
Yep. And then there's this like tiger that walks around. And then the only thing that's kind of really in there's a wall that has like a time series chart of their blockchain accomplishments. And another thing that plays a video from their June 2021 e-commerce and fintech event. And there is an upstairs, which I was able to, manipulate and get myself upstairs. I didn't find anything there other than this other female avatar that kept walking into me. So I figured this was somebody who also had no clue how to use the virtual reality metaverse. But it, to me, isn't even about being in the metaverse. What I think JP Morgan has nailed is the opportunity is in funding the building of the metaverse. And there's going to be a lot of entrepreneurs and established companies who want to get in. And of course, it's the whole payment aspect to it. And I don't think that that's necessarily a viable opportunity for a lot of credit unions to do. I mean, you've got to be the size of Chase to really be looking at that. But the funding aspect of this and the lending opportunity, I think, is a huge, huge opportunity for the credit union world.
So I would like to rebuttal just a bit here and there. I want to agree with you. I love that you said, because I was trying to think of it as virtual mortgages or explain it and kind of use that as sort of a thing, but you translating that to small business opportunity, like that was the line that really caught me. So there's your praise. I disagree with you that the meta experience of a branch could be different. And let me explain why. One, if you want to, attract the cool kids, you got to go where they hang out. And the metaverse is growing. The product I just showed you outsold, Xboxes and PS5s, last year at Christmas. Now that said, you couldn't find PS5s and Xboxes, so take that for what it's worth, a supply chain issue. But hey, give it to Facebook for managing to produce enough of them. And either way, they outsold them, and now there are more more out there. And I'll tell a quick story. So I'm in rural Tennessee right now. I'm in a place called Hohenwald, Tennessee, which if you're German translates to high forest. And I had to drive all the way into Nashville to go to a Best Buy this weekend. So I went to the Best Buy to get something. There was a person in front of me. He was an older Black gentleman. He had he had a bunch of Oculus stuff. And I was worried because he saw him wandering around the Oculus place. And I said, hey, man, I said, how's the Oculus treating you? Because he had accessories. He didn't have an actual Oculus. So I was like, oh. So I just asked him, hey, how's that treating you? He goes, oh, my kids got me into this, and now I can't put it down. Another example, Thomas Middleditch, some of you may know him from Silicon Valley. So he played Richard. So I was chatting with him, and he got into that. And I told him, hey, you can make it so that you're filming yourself in it. He's like, oh, it's nuts. So I use this kind of rudimentary, like how it comes up sort of in my life to sort of gauge how pervasive it is. And I think it's more pervasive than we think. The next step is, I don't think we're talking about like a flat screen home banking inside a branch. I think what I picture this as, and where I see an opportunity for the credit union industry, is the best thing about the credit union industry has never been its tech. Sorry, guys, everybody's going to, beat me up, but it's just true. The best thing about the credit union industry is its people. It's all the people that work for the branches. They're known for their service. They're known for their personality. They're known for understanding their their members because of the segs, those sorts of things. We've lost that as we try to digitize it. I believe the metaverse brings an opportunity to bring, Sally at the branch into a virtual environment where you can interact with her. And I've seen the tech, I just got back from CES 2022. It was amazing, some of the stuff that was out there. I've seen the tech that I think will bring that to bear. The other thing I think that may be different than banking from credit unions is, I see this as an opportunity to reinvent shared branching. I think that maybe you could use it as a growth opportunity if people were willing to use it. And the other thing is, and I think JP Morgan gets this, and this makes your point, Ron, on the last article. If I were going to look for a business loan, I certainly would go to the bank that has a metaverse branch, because their business lenders are more likely to understand the concept. So
Can I rebut your rebuttal?
I think you can rebut the rebuttal. Yes, please.
I've been making some great points. I do. There's a timing aspect to all this, John. If we go back to 1996 and say, do we need to have, a presence on the internet? Most credit unions didn't, for sure. Not 1996, 1997. Absolutely. And the ones who did, I'm not sure really benefited all that much greatly from those that didn't develop one until 2002, 2003. my colleague Alex Johnson, who writes a newsletter on Substack called FinTech Takes, wrote an article last week about why banks and credit unions should not be building branches in the metaverse right now. And his point was simply there's just not enough people wandering around these things to do it. So number one, I don't think, while there's many people who are, I think you're right that there is strong adoption and it's growing. It's kind of like, John, if Walt Disney World was open, and I don't mean like because closed for COVID, but I mean like an open loop versus a closed loop environment. Sure. Would you build a bank branch there? I think the only credit union that should is Partners, because the Disney employees are members. But to the everyday credit union, what the argument is, people go to Disney World to go on the rides, not to do their banking. And sure. I think the people who are going into the metaverse today are going there to play games, to participate in events, and maybe to do some shopping, who knows, but I don't think they're going there for the banking. So I think it's way too early in the evolution of this to do it. And second, I do totally agree with your point that the credit union strength is the people. But why not just enable more FaceTime and Zoom meetings? Why do I have to jump over that and go to virtual reality when there's existing technology and tools to enable face-to-face communication between members and credit union personnel?
So two things there. Great points. He just mentioned Apple's XR kit. That's exactly what the point I'm making. So one point I'll make is, I was at a credit union in 1996. I bought the URL for the credit union, the domain name. I tried to expense it, and they said, "What the heck is that?" It was $12, and back then I'd made 22,000, and so $12 was a lot to John. And they said, "Why'd you buy this?" And I said, "Because we're going to need it." And they said, "We don't think we'll ever need it." Fast forward a year later, when they go and they see my name on it, and someone comes, looking around for me in marketing going, "Hey, you own whatever." And I went, "Yep, I do, here." And I handed it over. I think that one of the things that's a challenge for credit unions is there's experiential learning and there's bot learning, right? Experiential learning is when the organization learns as a whole, and obviously they put their foot in the water. Problem is, and that's what JP Morgan is doing right now with their tigers and their special pictures and all that. We normally don't have the money to do that. I do agree with you. I would not suggest every credit union go out there and do something. Where I see the opportunity is for the credit union to recognize the credit union industry to recognize exponential technology and collaborate and get together and build one branch, because the magic of the metaverse is that one branch could be everybody's branch, every single credit union. And it could, have technology that would allow that. And certainly the credit union industry on the whole should be looking into, if JP Morgan's doing it, if others are doing it, I would argue that they need to at least be understanding it. And my thought would be, and I would say this, not understanding crypto and working at a credit union is a little like not understanding streaming and working at Blockbuster. And that didn't end well for the Blockbuster folks. So, and I run into a lot of executives and I go, "Have you bought some Bitcoin?" "No, I have not done that." Of course you haven't, but yet you want to talk about it. We have to stop that. That is endangered thinking. And it creates an opportunity for extinction events. When I started in this industry, by the way, in 1996, which is what you mentioned, I think there were 24,000 credit unions. Ron, I met you along the way. We spoke together at many events. I remember one point you on the stage, which, I got to open for the great Ron Shevlin. It was awesome. And I got to sit back and watch him do his thing afterwards. And, you said at the time, I think it was like 2003, we were in Virginia somewhere at some CUSO's speaking event. And you said, "Well, right now there's like 15,000 credit unions, but I predict we'll get down to something." I think you said 5,000 or under at the time. And here we are. But I do believe some of that's because we tend to, you mentioned Google and their proclivity for failure. Well, that's a big deal. That they're willing to fail is why they've been so successful. We are not willing to fail at all in this industry. And so as a result, we don't try things, and then we don't learn about them. Apple never does anything first. They always do it second or third. And when they do, they kill it. And so they're going to be watching this metaverse thing and other things. So I guess where I'm at with this, I agree with you on some things, but there are some things I just think that if we don't change our ways, we're going to be, we're going to continue to be the GDP that we have. And I'm speaking specifically about the credit industry, because that's kind of what we hang in.
All good points, John. And I go back to the history and go, look, we could have had this same exact conversation in 1996, 97. And, I don't think that the credit unions who didn't make it from 1997 to 2021, 2022, I don't think they were the ones who didn't jump on the new technology bandwagons early. They tend to be ones that, first of all, made bad risk decisions, bad lending decisions, and didn't have growth strategies for growing to the point where, look, we're at a point where you can argue what that minimum level is. But it's funny, I asked this in a number of surveys, and I've seen other surveys that ask, what's the minimum asset size? So whether it's $500 million, $1 billion, $5 billion, I don't know what it is, but certainly there are, is getting to a point where many institutions feel the need for scale. Now, interestingly, I do think there's ways of using technology to scale better. I think the whole open, I was going to say open finance, but that's too broad a term. And I'll probably insult Kat Benedict's, because I know she runs open finance for MX, and I'll get into a battle with her on the definition of that. But the whole banking as a service embedded finance opportunity, I think has a lot of growth opportunities. And so, look, there's a lot of different things that credit unions can be doing right now. And just like going back to the earlier conversation, John, just as Google has to figure out its strategy, so do a lot of credit unions to figure out, because they simply, unlike a Chase with $12 billion to spend on technology, or unlike a Google with probably $112 billion to spend on technology, there are no credit unions in the United States with unlimited funds to spend. So you've got to pick their spots. And I would really argue, John, that right now in 2022, early 2022, understanding the metaverse and virtual reality is super important for credit unions to have an understanding of, but to be making investments in it really needs to be driven by, some clear strategic, not just, gee, let's experiment with this and see where it goes kind of stuff.
I could see your point there. And I want to be clear. I think one point that we're kind of missing each other on, I am not saying any single credit union should do that. I am continually harping on credit union superpower is collaboration. And while, yes, there is no single credit union that should be spending that kind of money, there should be consortiums of hundreds of them that have someone in their organization, because innovation is just not a complete discipline within most of those organizations, where it is at banks. And they even have fintech, cultivators. They have, incubators for those sorts of things that just don't exist. And they're starting to exist in the QSOs, but I'm not sure that we're just paying lip service to it. So, and it's part of it is that resistance to failure. But I will say this, and I'll end on this because it's right at time. And I love talking to you. You know that. The place I do agree with you is we have to crawl before we walk. When you say, hey, John, what about FaceTime? What about this? Yes. If you don't already have some sort of video type process that you can do on Zoom or something with members, then yeah, skip the metaverse because you're way behind. I would say the same thing about appointment setting, which, by the way, turned out to be a big deal in 2020 and 2021. You wrote about it. But how many years did that sit on the back burner? Until there was a crisis that put it forward. And then turns out we can do a lot of things if we really want to. Who knew, right? Like if you want to make everybody work from home in a day, turns out a crisis can sort of make that happen. Which, by the way, if I walked into any boardroom and said, I got an idea, let's all work from home. And, oh, by the way, I think I can do it in 2 days. Everyone would have bounced me out of there. As a matter of fact, I did get bounced out of credit unions for talking about, hey, if you're going to find talent, you're going to have to get away from this. They have to work in our four walls. Because that's not going to be the future. So I always love, I love that you're looking out for us. And I do think blocking and tackling is important. I like that Mike said Here's my new idea, by the way. I thought you want to go in on this with me. So if there's going to be property in the metaverse, then we need the Airbnb for the metaverse. So I bought metabnb.com. So if you'd like to work with me, we can help rent out other people's properties on the web to people who want to use them. So if you'd like to join me on that, Ron, I figure you got a lot of cash to throw around. So
yeah, but I have to clear it with my wife. So
yeah. If your wife says, can I talk to her?
Yeah, absolutely.
I could pitch it. Cool. Then I'm in. Well, listen, everyone, this has been, and Ron, why don't you get the last word in? Go ahead. Thank you so much.
No, you got it. I'm done.
You're done. I'm done with you. No, it was a great meeting. And thank you so much for all that you put out there and joining us. It was fantastic. And
thanks for
call me on the next article. I'm happy to jump in on with you.
Will do.
You could quote me. All right. Thanks, everyone. And have a great day.
Well done, lads.
Thanks, guys.